The next topic is rogue states and terrorism. Now, I think bringing this back to September 11th, if September 11th demonstrated one thing, to me, it's that terrorist organizations and rogue states are a destructive force in the world. They are dangerous, and there were a lot of questions about how the United States as a powerful state should proceed, morally speaking. Even if we accept that, and I think we have to, that the United States and its allies are not, so to speak, without sin, do their resources, does their power obligate them to respond in certain ways for the good of the world?
Well, I think, why don't you ask yourself the question, should the U.S. Air Force bomb Washington? You think so? I mean, the United States is one of the main centers of international terrorism. Well, I don't think so. Nor do I think the victims of U.S. international terrorism should bomb Washington. I don't think that's the right way to respond. And I don't think any of us do. So I think we know the answer to your question. Yes, you're right. Rogue states, states that violate international law, for example, a state that vetoes a resolution calling on all states to observe international law, yeah, they're a problem in the world. In fact, if you look at the official reasons, take a look at the official reasons sometime as to why the U.S. rejected the World Court decision. You know how to find that. You're students at a great university. The way you find it is you look up the State Department bulletin. You find out what the State Department legal advisor had to say about the matter, and you'll find it. I can't give you if you want, I'll give you the exact date if you want to email me. But the State Department legal advisor, Abraham Sofair, pointed out that the United States must reject the jurisdiction of the World Court. They didn't even wait for the decision, rejected the jurisdiction because they knew what was going to happen. And the reason was, I'm virtually quoting, this is not an exact quote, but pretty close. He said, in the early days of the United Nations, other countries went along with us. But by the 1960s, that was no longer true. It's what I described before. And he said, by now, many countries of the world simply do not agree with us and the positions we take. Accordingly, the United States must reserve for itself the right to decide what actions fall within the domestic jurisdiction of the United States. The act that was within the domestic jurisdiction of the United States at that time was the U.S. terrorist attack against Nicaragua. Well, a country like that is a danger to the world. And it's nothing new about it. In 1962, at the time of the Cuba has been the main target of terrorist attack for the last 40 years from the United States. In 1962, which was one of the bad years, this was official, incidentally. It's Kennedy's Operation Goose. Dean Acheson, leading elder statesman, is either 62 or 63, I've forgotten, gave a talk to the American the American Society of International Law, the leading professional society, in which he explained, you can read it in their journal, that the issues that affect the prestige, power, and interests of the United States are not a legal issue. Couldn't be clearer than that. In other words, we're a rogue state. Furthermore, this is well recognized. I mean, I'll quote Foreign Affairs again. One of the leading conservative commentators in the United States, Samuel Huntington, university professor at Harvard, had an article in Foreign Affairs 2 or 3 years ago in which he said the following. He said, for much of the world, he intimated most of the world, the United States is regarded as a rogue state and the leading threat to their existence. Well, this is a voice from the right, in the main establishment journal. But he's probably correct. That is the way most of the world looks at us. And there's nothing new about it. For example, so yes, rogue states are a danger. And what do you do about them? Well, in the case of a major rogue state like the United States, the only thing that can constrain it is its own population. It can't be constrained from the outside. There's no possible way. How do you react to other terrorist states, like Al-Qaeda, for example, terrorist organization? Well, I agree with the right-wing position on this. Michael Howard in Foreign Affairs, for example, or the Vatican, which took essentially the same position. I think that's correct. That's the way to deal with terrorist forces or any other criminals. But of course, if we're honest, we apply the same reasoning to ourselves.
So, just to follow up, to be a little bit more specific, I mean, what do we do in 2002?
I think we should do what Michael Howard and the Vatican suggested. If there are criminal
and what would the
actions,
outcome of that be?
Pardon?
I think there's people on the right and on all ends of the political spectrum who would doubt that that would lead to any safer a safer world.
I doubt it too. Getting rid of criminals in the legal fashion does not make it a safer world. I mean, when there are crimes in the streets, there are ways of dealing with them, but it doesn't bring about the end of crime.
So are we doomed to see our cities blown up year after year?
No, in fact, we can. If you want to be serious about it, what you do is deal with it. First of all, remember that most of the terrorism comes from us. Okay, so if we're serious about it, we look at, not surprisingly, you'd expect the more powerful forces to be the most violent. That's the way history works, and that's the way it works now. In the days when the British Empire was running the world, the British were the most violent force in the world. There's nothing surprising. But yes, the problems about dealing with violence. And the way you deal with it is known. I mean, take, say, IRA bombs in London. Okay, I mean, that was criminal. Pretty serious, too. The IRA tried to kill the whole British cabinet at one point with bombs. Well, how did Britain respond? Well, one way to respond would have been, for example, to bomb Boston, which is the main center for financing the IRA, or maybe maybe drop a nuclear weapon on Belfast. That would be one way to respond. Another way to respond was to try to find out who did it, apprehend them, sentence them, and consider the background. Pay some attention to the grievances. Because any act that takes place, whether it's a crime in the streets or a crime of international terrorism, there's usually something behind it. Maybe. And usually if you look, you find there's some element of legitimacy in what's behind it. And if you're serious about trying to stop crime, no matter whether it's small or large, you try to find out what the grievances are and deal with them if they're legitimate. Not just because there was a crime, but because it's right to deal with them. Okay, so in fact that's what Britain did. It investigated the legitimate grievances that lay behind the criminal acts that it was stopping, and that was the right way to proceed, and it's had a degree of success. And that's correct.